Here is how you can take a regular digital camera setup and make your own 35mm scanning setup for £30. In recent years, there's been a lot of options available to photographers in terms of home scanning, whether it's your flatbeds or your old lab equipment knocking around, or it's the new products coming from the likes of Valoi or lomography. But all these options, they sort of had, there's a recurring theme. They're all kind of expensive if you're trying to shoot on a budget. I bought my flatbed scanner a few years ago and that was a couple of £100, but I remember sort of like thinking of it as an investment and working out how many times I would have had to go to a lab to get the scans to get my money's worth out of this thing. And if you're trying to shoot on a shoestring, it's quite a big chunk. I mean, it's potentially like your dream camera's worth of money going specifically on a scanning setup. So I wanted to sort of see if there was another way around this. Another reason why I want to explore this idea was I love the flatbed. The Epson 3600 is really, really good. For medium format scanning, it's bang on the money, but for 35mm, to scan a whole roll, it takes so long. And once you've scanned it in, sometimes it depends on the film because like the film can warp, but you lose a bit of sharpness, and then so you have to do more in post, and then it's just one of those things where you end up chasing your tail. So surely there has to be a quicker way, right? Now it's got my design brain ticking. We're lucky because film photography has been around for well over 100 years, and people have not necessarily used it for scanning onto computer 50 years ago, but they've wanted to replicate frames or, scan stuff at home in some shape or form, or, recreate frames. And there's a wealth of old film photography equipment, or even just camera accessories and stuff. There's a wealth of stuff out there, and a lot of people just want to get rid of it because it's taking up space. So you can get stuff quite cheap. And I do like a bargain, and I do like browsing random stuff on eBay. So this is right up my street. So after realising the problems, we have to make it brief. I think there was 3 key points I wanted to this setup to achieve. Number 1, it has to be quicker than the flatbed, because otherwise I can just use the flatbed. 2, it has to be cheaper than a brand new 35mm setup, because I could just save myself a lot of hassle and just buy an off-the-shelf product from Valoi or lomography and get good results. Thirdly, this one is quite an important one, and I think sometimes we don't think about this, but it has to be modular. To be modular, you've got room to grow, so that means I can swap out parts as time goes on. I mean, say down the line, I get a new camera, I can just swap that out, bigger sensor. Or if I wanted to use a different lens, so it might not like the results of this lens I've got. Or even just swap out the individual components, so I don't have to say buy a whole new setup. So this is something that I've got and I can grow. Now I've got a clear idea of what I wanted. I was starting to sort of browse and just research and see what was out there. I like the idea of, the copy stand and the bellows and, just something like mechanically just looks fantastic. But instantly, as I started looking around, it was very, very clear that the budget is just going to go up and then up and up and then back to square one, really. Also, I come to the conclusion that adding like a bellows setup, you add an extra components that could go wrong, because especially if you're buying old bellows, there could be light leaks and then you're chasing your tail, and then that is one extra thing which is inhibiting the fast, efficient workflow of scanning, because you're going to be, messing around. So I started just browsing the internet and sort of started falling down the rabbit hole of looking at old forum posts and stuff. And I started looking at old slide duplicators. So as I started to fall down this rabbit hole of looking at old slide duplicators, I started seeing there was a lot of ones on eBay that were really, really, really cheap. And I thought, no, it can't be, this is too simple. And so I ended up buying this. It's an old jessop slide duplicator for £10. And the idea is you mount this to lens, and then the lens connects to the camera, and you've got the right distance, and you've got somewhere to hold your slides. The light goes in there, illuminates the frame, bulbs your ankle, your slides is duplicated. Now, as soon as I got it, I knew it wasn't the right one for me. Why? Because if you look in there, you'll see there's optics. And now, this was a mass-produced kind of low-end on the consumer spectrum product. And so, it's not going to be good glass, is it? And you're trying to make a replication of a frame. You want the least interference as possible. You want that frame to get onto the sensor, the camera. Anything in between that is either going to have to be crystal clear or not. And if it's not, then it's not good enough, because you're just going to be back in the same stage you were with a flatbed, where you're going to get aberrations, or it's going to be slightly soft or whatever. So I kept looking and I kept reading, and then I found this. Now, this slide duplicator I found for 15 quid. Actually, no, it might have been less. Might have been 13 quid. Anyway, it was just as cheap. But this one, as soon as I seen it, I knew it was the right one. For some reason in the UK, there isn't many of this kind in there, but there's a lot in America. But they are available. This one, it was found in the UK, but there's no optics. So it is just a straight up holder attached to an adjustable sort of zoom mechanism, and then that mounts onto the front of your lens, and then away you go. As soon as I seen this, I knew it was the right one. So now I've got this new duplicator. There was still a couple of questions left to answer. I need to find a way to achieve macro focus, because I don't have a macro lens, and I didn't want to spend the money on a macro lens, so that would sort of defeat the whole purpose of this project. So I wanted to take an existing lens that I had, which is this Zeiss 50mm, which is sort of a kit lens, essentially. A very, very good kit lens, but a kit lens nonetheless. And make this macro lens. Now, this is something that I've sort of been aware of for a while and kind of wanted to try. You can get macro extension tubes quite cheaply on Amazon and eBay. I think these were, I think it was about 15 quid. So there's essentially 3 tiers. And they mount into the back of your lens, then into the camera. So this is the X mount lens, which is attached to a CY to FX mount adapter, which is then attached to the lens. So you can essentially, you got limitless ideas for a setup. Whatever combination you've got, you can sort of find a way to adapt it to your digital camera. So how I'll assemble this, and I'll show for you how I'll put it all together. So you take your lens, you take your adapter, match up the red dots, boom, you've just created a macro lens. Right, now, take your lens cap off, screw mount. I had luckily the right step up ring for this, but this is a 55 to 52mm. Just by chance I had the right one, but you can find them quite cheap, and even you can find them in like bargain bins in camera shops, and people pretty much giving them away. So it's always handy just having a set, just so you can, for stuff like this. That screws together like so. Now you got an absolute weapon. Right, put that there. You take your camera. I'm using Fuji X-E2. Now this is quite interesting because I wasn't sure if it would be good enough to scan. So it's only 16 megapixels, but when I actually thought about how big a 16 megapixel image is, I thought actually, yeah, no, it's probably, I mean, if you get scanned from a lab, like the average sized image, it'd probably be quite similar to that anyway. So, and a lot of the output for the images I create ain't going to be blown up anyway. So I thought it was all fine. I mean, later down the line, I can upgrade this camera. So take the lens off. Take the absolute unit. Match up the red dots. Boom. You have got yourself quite compact scanning setup. Okay, right. Now I'm going to demonstrate to you how quick this is. I'm going to try and do it in real time. I mean, there might be some cuts, but It does take too long. I'm still new to this app, so this could get quite fiddly. But what we're going to do, we're going to scan a frame from this roll of film that was shot in my last 1 hour challenge video. I remember mentioning in this video that I wasn't quite happy with the scans that I got back. So this can be a good example to see the difference. We can compare them side by side and see if we can achieve that sharpness with this setup. For a light source, to keep costs down and just to sort of demonstrate that you can use stuff in and around your camera setup and stuff you might actually have at home. I'm using my iPad screen as a light table, or you could use your phone screen. I think these would be good if you're like traveling about. I don't think it's the absolute answer, because they're still a little bit darker. If having a dedicated light table and one you can adjust the color temperature on can help if you scan different sorts of films, and it makes everything a lot less fiddly. But I think for now I can just use this, and I think further down the line I'll invest. But this is show an example of the modular approach. If you say bought a product with a built-in light that you don't quite like, then you're sort of stuck with it. There's no room to upgrade. So let's get on with this. Firstly, we've got to mount the film. So there's a little clip on top of here, and there's a little flap like that. Pretty cool. No, simple things. Now we got the frame. We're gonna have to mount it. To be honest, I'm assuming there probably will be a difference if I do this the wrong way around, but we're gonna find out. So you mount it in like so. Boom. And you've got turn the camera on. Settings are quite important. Try and keep the ISO as low as possible. Also, you got, I'd say, pick an aperture like 5.6 or 8. F8 seems to be sort of the go-to one, but obviously this means you're gonna have to go for quite a long shutter. But because this is all fixed, you can sort of get away with shooting it handheld. I mean, obviously, if there's a lot of movement and there's quite a long exposure, then that goes out the window. But I tried it the other day and I sort of managed to get away with it. Again, could be a potential teething issue, something you work out and develop on as you build and expand, maybe like a sort of horizontal tripod setup, or you could even just try and buy a copy stand to do it vertically. This is all personal preference, but for the sake of the video, we're going to do it this way. So, as you can see, there's the frame mounted. Now I've got to try and find focus and make sure the frame is 100% 90 degrees parallel. So the frame is a little bit cropped. I'm setting it to 1.7 just so I can make sure I nail the focus on it. And I've got focus peaking turned on, so I can see it when it's properly in the pocket. I think it's about there. I can see it's soft around the edges now, but that's only because I'm shooting at 1.7. I'll set it to F8. Right, it's going to be quite a long exposure, but we're going to try it and see if it comes out shaky. So I'm going to put it against the light table, the iPad, and take a shot. Zoom in just to double check. Okay, so we've got the images transferred the images onto my laptop now and into Lightroom. And I've got the original scan from the lab, which is sitting side by side. It's now sat side by side. Straight off the bat, the first thing is the image on the left, which is from the lab, is a much smaller file. And the one on the right I shot in RAW, and is dimensions of nearly 5,000 by 3,000 and a bit, roundabout. And the one from the lab is 1,500 by 1024. Now, obviously, you can pay for higher res scans, etc., but straight off the bat, I've got so much more information to play with, and plus, because it's a RAW, you've got a lot more dynamic range, and so you can bring back the highlights and stuff, and information that might get lost. And I think inherently from a lab scan, because I didn't really request any special treatment from the game is quite naturally flat, and sometimes that can wash out highlights, and that can sort of make an image that's just slightly underexposed look even more underexposed, and it can just, and then you try to sort of save it in post, and then it sort of, in my mind, it goes into a mushy mess. It might not, and there is sometimes the photos work, and there's that vibe, that film vibe, which people do go after, but sometimes when you want a nice sort of image, it's not the look to go for. But so this is the image I took in and converted using Negative Lab Pro. I done some bare minimum tweaking, so it was just slightly adjusting the exposure levels and getting the white balance right. But you can see already that there's a bit more information in the highlights, and in terms of sharpness and focus, they're quite similar. I don't think the image was hitting critical focus anyway, to be honest. And I don't know if it's the sharpest lens. I'm not really, don't have too much experience with that lens. But so we've already sort of leveled up. For the sake of 30 quid now, I can make infinite reproductions of frames, this res, in this size, and get all this information as a starting point to, you know, do everything. The one downside, obviously, is dust. Dust is your enemy. And there's quite a lot of dust on this frame. That's purely because I can be bothered doing that. But had I had the whole roll and I was doing this properly and not fiddly, and potentially had a good light setup, you know, you can get one of those blowers to blow the dust off, or even a brush or whatever. Maybe adding an attachment onto the sides, the slide holder, just to sort of brush the dust off as it goes in, really. But again, modular, you can add that in. Now, also, this was one I done on the first day I got the setup earlier this week, and this frame came out of my Yashica T4, and I knew the lens was sharp as hell on that, and I knew it was in focus, so it made a good candidate just to be the test frame. So I knew it was already in focus, so that means if it's out of focus, then that's me missing focus while scanning it. And I converted it. I haven't got a lab scan to compare this with, but I was just blown away. It was just by the instant results. So I sort of just done it, set up on my dining, took it out of the boxes, assembled it, got this negative, put it in, took the photo, shut the memory card on my laptop. It's just like as quickly as possible, quickly like that. You've got a massive file now. You can do whatever you want. But overall, I'm pretty happy with the setup. I think there's some teething issues just to work out, really. But once I've got those nailed in and dialed in, I think it'd be such an efficient setup to have. And in theory, I can take this away with me. Like, if I went to another country, found a lab, got them to develop a film, I've got those negatives, I can scan it in a hotel room. I get high-res scans. Do you know what I mean? And for 30 quid to add to an existing digital setup, I've sort of just opened up a whole world of stuff, really. Obviously, one of the criteria was to make this quicker than the flatbed. I think doing it handheld and with this sort of setup horizontally like this, I think it can make it quite fiddly and awkward. It's version 2 of the setup. Again, I'm using stuff that I already had in my camera bag. So you've got your tripod and you've got your shutter release cable. This tripod's pretty got a cool feature where you can hang the camera this way as opposed to have it on the top to enable you to get sort of low down shots or these sort of top down shots. A lot of good half decent tripods have this feature. The shutter release cable I sort of added on. It's not essential really, but it just makes life easier. You can just trigger it just like that without having to touch the camera. So we're going to scan a frame in real time just to show you how less fiddly it is. So turn the camera on. I've already focused up and set the aperture and stuff. And the light table, the makeshift light table's on the iPad. So, and there we go. And as you can see, we've already got the frame. So much less fiddly than even the version 1 setup, but that took 1 second to do. And now if I wanted to shoot the next frame, all I have to do is, well, I'm going to try and do it one-handed, but as you can see, it's moving. And then, oh, release it. It's a job done. I think these 2 additions sort of made the setup a lot easier, but this is stuff that was already lying around, so still, I mean, the premise of the setup is the slide duplicator and the macro extension. Those are the only 2 bits you need to add to an existing camera setup, and I'm assuming if you're already watching this video, you probably have most of this already. I think the obvious upgrade next is the light table, but as you can see, I've already got my foot in the door, and the actual scans themselves are still going to be good quality. It's just I would prefer brighter, better lit back screen that I can sort of change the temperatures on. But all in all, I'm pretty happy with the setup. Thanks for watching the video, and remember to like and subscribe.